Almost every sector is in limbo as the cases continue to surge and as restrictions are heightened once again. The property space is no exception to that. But how is one developer in Visayas and Mindanao coping? Do they feel spared from the hit? To talk about that, we have with us Grant Cheng, CFO of Cebulan Masters. Good morning, Grant.
Morning, Jess. Thanks for having me.
All right, of course, we do know that directly affected, you have the NCR plus bubble or NCR in nearby provinces. Do you feel safe in your region, and besides in Mindanao? Do you feel like construction activity will remain unhampered at the moment?
Well, I think unhampered is too optimistic a term, but I would say that the situation is much better than what probably a lot of people are experiencing in the NCR and what they're seeing, what they're experiencing firsthand. Because it's important to remember that different markets and the different regions, the different areas where we're operating, all have very different levels of exposure and therefore different levels of responses of quarantine and GCQ. And I was listening to your news report, in fact, earlier. I think this is reflected in how our government has responded, in fact, to this renewed uptake or this spike in COVID cases. They're looking at which regions are more severely affected and are responding commensurately. And so fortunately in the Vismin region, and especially in Central Visayas, here in Cebu, where our headquarters are, the cases are relatively controlled. We're looking at, I'm monitoring it every day. In Cebu City, there was less than 100 a day. The hospital capacities are still very, the capacities are managed very well. They're not overwhelmed. So really, with continued blessings, we could maintain that and we could learn the lessons of our countrymen and not let it get to that level.
But I mean, we did see Cebu as well experiencing a surge in cases at least at the start
Last
of
year.
the year. Yeah,
Correct.
or even at the end of 2020, carrying on to the start of 2021. Now, should
That's
there
right.
be a recurrence of that, is Cebulan Masters ready?
We are, and we anticipate. We never actually relaxed, or we never went into okay, it's back to normal mode. We've always told all our employees, our workers, that we should still follow proper sanitation and social distancing protocols. We should still act, and we are acting as if the pandemic is around us, and that we have to respect this virus. We have to respect the reality of it, and that we have to respect each other. And so in our workplace, in our construction sites, we have very strict screening protocols. We remind everyone that there's also a good faith system where if you feel any symptoms or anyone is in your household, then they are free to report it and they should self-quarantine. So yes, we've always been prepared and we've actually never let our guard down, I should say.
You did mention earlier that lease property space in the Visayas and Mindanao is faring better compared to Metro Manila. But the thing is, in 2020, most major property players experienced a dip in earnings. Given what you said earlier, should we be expecting CLI or Cebulan Masters to buck that trend?
I would say that we're pretty much on track to hit our guidance that we gave to our analysts last year, which is that we're very confident that we can replicate our 2019 numbers within a 10% bandwidth. That's what we've said all along. We've tracked our numbers, and as we closed our books and as we confirm these numbers, which we'll officially announce next week on April 7, I can pretty much say we're pretty much on track to do that. And so compared to other industry players, I'm very optimistic that our numbers will come out relatively better.
Okay, and what do you feel, and what has driven those more optimistic figures, at least for 2020?
I should just say, by the way, this is not, I'm not, I'm talking confidently, and we put our money where our mouths are. We just declared a dividend. So that tells you how confident management is in terms of delivering these numbers. So that's a great question. So what's the backdrop for these numbers? The fundamental equation of our economy, supply and demand, that just has not changed, which means for the housing sector, especially in Vismin, there's just so many more people looking for housing than there is demand, than there is supply being delivered to the market. And that goes on every year. There's just more demand being generated, being created, than supply being put out in the market. And what has happened is that during this pandemic, even as some sectors or some demographics have had a difficult time, or where their take up of housing has fallen off, there are other sectors in the country that has taken up that demand. And so if you look at our 2020 reservation sales, which is the amount of people and the value of the contracts we managed to close in 2020, we were actually higher than that of 2019. So the underlying fundamental equation of supply and demand is still very much intact, especially in the Vismin region for the housing sector.
Given that, are you seeing momentum picking up well into 2021, and what are you banking on? Is this more of the trend? Of course, is now there's a higher demand for socialized and mid-market housing. Is this something that you are going to take advantage of, at least coming into 2021?
We are, Jess, and we are already taking advantage of it. We recently launched a mid-market condominium project here in Mandaue, and we sold out 60% in when we launched it just last month. Just underscores how much demand and there is in this region. And yes, this has always been the bread and butter of Cebulan Master, the type of housing that we can create with a certain budget that's price competitive, with excellent locations and amenities. So we're pretty confident that our strategy and our value proposition to our buyers and, of course, to our investors remain very much intact.
All right. Thank you for your time this morning, Grant Cheng, CFO of Cebulan Masters. Thank you, Grant.
Thank you, Jess.